if you all of a sudden, from the committee standpoint, are telling the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten, hey guys, yep, we are really going to hold the teams accountable that lose in the conference championship game, you're basically telling teams not to play in the conference championship game. Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. It is a Sunday edition. However, today's Sunday a little different than what we've done in the past. Normally, I'd be coming to you with our 10 takeaways, and today, obviously, with it being selection day, things change just a little bit. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Glad to have you with us. I am here in Bristol, Connecticut. Just got off the set of our 3-hour college football playoff rankings release special. And it was a chaotic day. Wild, to be honest with you. We're going to try to make sense of it today. We're going to also talk a little bit about the conference championship games that we watched this past weekend, give you a few takeaways from those, and we'll try to make sense of what this playoff might look like here as we move forward into the first round, just 12 days from now. It's going to be here quickly. We will have games upon us very, very soon. I want to begin by asking all of you to continue to subscribe to the podcast if you could. You can also go and subscribe to the ESPN College Football YouTube page. That would be super helpful as well. So let's dive in. We will start with the college football playoff. The teams that got in, the teams that did not make it, what tweaks are likely to be coming here very soon, and what gripes do I have about the current version of the college football playoff. Well, sitting at number one was the Indiana Hoosiers. It should not come as a huge surprise. If you watched Indiana and their performance against Ohio State, it was remarkably impressive, clutch down the stretch. And while, yes, Ohio State made mistakes in the ball game that gave Indiana the opportunity to win, Indiana, I think, on both sides of the ball all year. So much has been made about Fernando Mendoza, the wide receivers, the way they can run the football, Curt Cignetti, his brash, unapologetic arrogance. That's what everyone talks about. What no one's really talked about is how good they've been on defense all throughout the year. Bryant Haynes, their defensive coordinator, I'll let you in on a little secret. I vote on the Broyles Award, which goes annually to the nation's best assistant coach. I voted for Bryant Haynes last year. So if that helps you understand just how good he's been as the DC at Indiana the last 2 years, now I have not submitted my vote just yet, but will soon. He'll be on the short list again. And I think the world finally got to see just how disruptive they are, just how aggressive they are, and how problematic they're going to be for every single team they play. A lot of people viewed Ohio State through the lens of an indestructible force, and they are in many ways. This is a really good group, and Saturday's result does not change my opinion of Ohio State at all. Yes, there's some things to iron out. Yes, their protection got overloaded from time to time. I didn't think Julian Sand had his best stuff, but the defense is what led to the pressure. The defense and the pressure that was applied by Indiana is why they sit as the number one overall seed. And I think they've now proven to everybody that it's not just about Fernando Mendoza. It's just not about finding ways to create lanes in the passing game, finding ways to create and manufacture explosives. They can win on both sides of the ball, and the avenues to victory for Indiana are multiple, all over the place. I am thoroughly impressed with everything we've seen from them. We will, of course, continue to talk about Indiana's dominance. We'll continue to talk about their growth and what Curt Cignetti's done. But that's not the story of the day today. However, going to the Rose Bowl for the first time in a long time, pretty dang neat for the Hoosiers. This 2 seed is Ohio State. And when I saw Ohio State listed as the 2 seed, not the 3, that essentially solidified Alabama's spot in the field. Ohio State lost the game. They made some mistakes. They didn't play well. But at the end of the day, the committee has already kind of set a precedent with last year's ranking that if you lose a conference championship game, they're not going to overly penalize you. And it became more, if you look at the metrics, Indiana and Ohio State's metrics, very, very similar. So what is the ultimate tiebreaker? the head-to-head. Indiana won the game, conference champion. They slide right in front of Ohio State, but they don't need to overly penalize Ohio State because they were clearly better in the eyes of the committee than Georgia going into conference championship Saturday. So once I saw Ohio State just fall down to 2, immediately antenna up, bells are going off in my head, and I'm thinking, all right, Bama's probably secure, and that's probably bad news for Notre Dame. That was the first indicator, was when we saw Ohio State on the 2 line. Georgia's at 3. Shouldn't require a whole lot of explanation. Georgia was so opportunistic and great on defense on Saturday, it's hard to even wrap your head around. And this has become a very good football team. They have talent. They've always had talent. That has not been up for debate. But they can beat you in so many ways now. I mean, we have now seen Georgia early in the season. What was it about for the Georgia Bulldogs? It was their offense. It was their explosiveness. It was their run game. It was their weaponry. It was their offensive line. And then that offensive line had an injury or two, and then they were a little out of sorts from time to time. But when you look at it, I mean, Georgia was an offense-led football team for the first half of this season. And then, as the season went along, Glenn Schumann, their defensive coordinator, Kirby Smart, their head coach, they found ways to manufacture pressure. They found ways to manufacture chaos with their defense, and it was on full display throughout the game against Alabama. Holding Alabama to -3 rushing yards, forcing Ty Simpson out of the pocket constantly. He was running for his life. He was getting hit. It affected his accuracy. It affected his rhythm. If you watch the first game between Alabama and Georgia, there was none of that. He was in complete control of the game from start to finish because he never really got hit. He never really got flustered, and the ball was able to come out on time as a result. And now this Georgia defense has evolved tremendously, and they've had injuries along the way. Some of their most disruptive guys didn't even play in the game on Saturday. So I look at Georgia, and I think the arrow is continuing to point up because we've seen them win on offense. We've seen them win on defense. We've seen them steal possessions by blocking a kick, by utilizing a surprise onside. This team can just beat you in so many different ways. I've been very, very impressed by the growth we've seen from the Dogs, and they are unbelievably worthy of being the SEC champ and to be the 3 seed there and playing in the All-State Sugar Bowl on January 1st. The 4 seed is Texas Tech. We kind of knew what the first 4 might look like, just weren't really sure of the order. But with Texas Tech's impressive performance against BYU, you knew it was a lock that they were going to be a first-round bye team. It's more about where were they going to go? Were they going to go to Dallas as a possible 3 seed? Were they going to go to the Orange Bowl as a possible 4 seed? Where was it all going to work out? Because, of course, if you're the Red Raiders, I want to go back to AT&T Stadium. I want to go back to Jerry World. I want to go play in very friendly and familiar confines. And they didn't get that opportunity, but they did get that first-round bye, and they did so with very impressive performance against BYU. And I think I look at BYU. I still think BYU is a very good football team. It was just a really bad matchup for BYU. If your identity is running the football, if your identity is trying to pound it, that's not going to work against Texas Tech. They're too good in the front 7 defensively, and they will be a really tough out in this playoff game. If you're looking at brands and teams that could make a run, and probably if you just look at the odds, Texas Tech's odds are much better, according to Vegas, than I think public perception. I think Vegas knows Texas Tech's a real threat, a real player, a team that really could go win this whole thing. But public perception has yet to really wake up to what Texas Tech might be capable of. They have a defensive line that can take over the game. They have a really nice identity offensively that has gotten better running the football. They've always been able to push it down the field. They have a veteran quarterback. I mean, they have a lot of what you would look for when looking for a team that could potentially make a run. So I am really optimistic with what I've seen from Texas Tech, and their performance against BYU did not come as a huge surprise to me. And the 4 turnovers forced in the second half, that's just what they've been. They are relentless when they attack the opposing quarterback and when they rip at the ball for every single ball carrier. At number 5, it was Oregon. It was not a huge surprise. Pretty much everyone in the top 5 kind of could have expected those were going to be the 5. It just was a matter of what order. Oregon locks down the first round bye. They, of course, didn't play this weekend. So not a takeaway, but you know it's going to be rocking in Autzen Stadium there on Saturday night. December 20th. That will be an incredible scene and one that I think a lot of people will be very anxious to watch. They'll face off against James Madison, who we'll talk about here in just a minute. But Oregon, yes, they do have the loss to Indiana. Yes, that was in Autzen. But Oregon's done everything that you could possibly have asked of them. And granted, their schedule was not to the point in which they had that big opportunity to play against Ohio State. They did take care of business when they played against a ranked SC team, won that game convincingly. They've been able to survive and advance with a very young football team, had to go on the road, have had to find ways at times against Penn State, against Iowa. Oregon is a very resilient group for a group that is so young. So they should be, hopefully for Oregon, to be a little healthier, hopefully get a couple weapons back on the outside. And when we see them in the playoff, hopefully they'll be playing at or near their best levels of football. Here's where the first gripe came in for me. And you'll probably say, why does it matter between 6 and 7? Well, the reason why it matters is because the first round opponent between who's sitting at 10 and who's sitting at 11, very, very different. Right now, Ole Miss is currently about a 16.5-point favorite over Tulane. Meanwhile, Texas A&M is just a 3.5-point favorite against Miami. So that is a near 2-touchdown difference when evaluating the quality of the competition that you'll face in the first round of the playoffs. So you're probably sitting there saying, like, Greg, why are you so concerned about it? Because I thought A&M had a very strong argument to be the 6th seed. Why? Because their strength of schedule is 26 spots higher than that of Ole Miss. Ole Miss is at 6, A&M is at 7. Well, Ole Miss is sitting there with the 41st ranked strength of schedule. And while I have a ton of respect for Ole Miss, they also have a great win. They went on the road and beat Oklahoma. They deserve immense credit for that. Well, guess what? Texas A&M went on the road and beat Notre Dame, and their strength of schedule sits at 16, whereas Ole Miss's strength of schedule sits at 41. So I thought A&M, if we're going off eye test, sure, they had some close games. They had a close game against Arkansas. They lost to Texas the last time out. They lost the game. So maybe recency bias is factoring in here as well. But I thought A&M should have been 6, Ole Miss should have been 7, which would have made a huge difference in what things might look like there in the first round and beyond, because A&M is going to be playing against a ridiculously physical Miami football team. So that, even in victory, will be a war before they have to potentially go and play against Ohio State in the second round if they can take care of business on their home field. So that was the first point where I had a bit of an issue. Oklahoma was in at 8, should not require a lot of explanation. That's where they were last week. Oklahoma's elite on defense, has been all season. The offense, though, has struggled at times. But here's hoping maybe some time off to kind of sit back and just assess where they can grow on that side of the ball. Hopefully they'll be a little better there in the postseason when they tee it up against Alabama. Alabama is where we'll start this entire conversation about who got in, who should have gotten in, and what the fallout looks like for all teams involved. Before we get to Alabama, though, I want to go back and then move my way up. James Madison is at 12, winners of the Sun Belt champion. They'll face Oregon there in the first round of the playoffs. Tremendous job by Bob Chesney to get that team back. But I'll explain why I have a hard time justifying their inclusion in this breakdown here in just a little bit. And then Tulane, the Green Wave, they punch their ticket. They'll go play against Ole Miss Rebels there in the first round. They are also American champs, deserve to be in without question under the current parameters. However, I don't know if I agree with the current parameters. Okay, moving on to the hottest topic of conversation on the day. The committee was put in a remarkably difficult spot. I'm just going to begin by saying that. And that is not a cop-out. That is not making excuses on their behalf. That is not me saying they got it right or me saying they got it wrong. I think they did what was most easily justifiable. And I'll explain here in just a minute. But let's start with why Alabama was in the field. They sit as the number 9 seed. Alabama made it to the SEC championship game. that shouldn't require a lot of explanation. They didn't play well in the game. Offensively, they were especially sloppy. They weren't good in protection. They couldn't run the football. Ty Simpson was really inaccurate relative to how he's played at his best throughout the season. And it was a substandard performance for Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide. So all that is understood. But when you look at that game, the Alabama defense played quite well in the matchup. They did give up nearly 300 yards, but there were 2 times in which Georgia got and started possession on the 21-yard line of Alabama and on the 12-yard line of Alabama. So that's 2 really short fields after a blocked punt and after Alabama decided to go for it on 4th and 2. So I think when you look at it, yes, 21-point margin of defeat. It was ugly on offense. I still didn't think that the committee was probably watching that game and thinking, yeah, this team is all of a sudden going to fall out of the playoffs. They're going to free fall out because, if anything, Alabama's metrics improved after the game against Georgia, which is mind-blowing. They lost the game convincingly. Totally true, totally fair. But they also improved their strength of schedule by 5 spots. Alabama right now has the 6th ranked strength of schedule. They are also in the top 10 when it comes to strength of record, and they're in the top 10 when it comes to FPI, which is essentially a power rating system. So I was not surprised to see Alabama fall in. All those reasons are why. But the main reason why I thought Alabama was not on the chopping block from the very beginning is because when you look at what the committee did last year, and this is the exact same conversation I had with our listeners, it's the exact same conversation I had last year as it related to SMU. SMU did not have the metric strength that Bama had last year. SMU's strength of schedule was way below. Their strength of record was way below. Yes, their win-loss record was very impressive, and they were in the field prior to playing in the ACC championship game. So when they were in the field and they lost that ACC championship game, I said leading into the show last year and on the back end of the show, I don't think the committee wants to set a precedent where they are de-incentivizing participation in the conference championship game. These conferences are very powerful. These conferences are very important. And if you all of a sudden, from the committee standpoint, are telling the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten, hey guys, yep, we are really going to hold the teams accountable that lose in the conference championship game, you're basically telling teams not to play in the conference championship game. So hypothetically here, what would have happened yesterday if Alabama said, you know what, guys, we're going to opt out of the SEC championship game. We're not going to play. We're in the field. We're in a good spot. We're not going to play that game. We don't need to. We're good. We're in. But why subject our team that's already totally banged up without a running back, without a tight end, without one of their best defensive ends, without all these players? We're already beat up. We don't have the bodies to be super competitive. So we're gonna take the game off. We're gonna make Ole Miss, you guys go. Oklahoma, you guys go ahead and play. I'm not saying that could happen. I'm not saying that would happen, but that's the message that's getting sent. If all of a sudden a team that's playing in a conference championship drops out in favor of 2 teams that weren't. So that's why I never thought Alabama was on the bubble. I never thought Alabama was in a position where they could fall out with a poor performance in the SEC championship game. Never, unless they got beat by 50. I didn't think that was ever going to happen because the SEC and Greg Sankey and Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, and Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, they want teams to play in their conference title. And all of a sudden, if the risk doesn't outweigh the reward, teams might choose not to in the future. And the committee does not want to deal with that slippery slope. That, to me, would have been a bridge too far. So I thought Alabama was in comfortably. That's where the committee saw it as well, which led to the conversation between Notre Dame and Miami. And I have watched both teams. I've probably watched almost every single offensive and defensive snap of both teams this season. And in an effort to have better perspective of those 2 teams, I went back on Saturday morning prior to the Big 12 championship game kicking off, and I watched the game tape and the coach's film of that matchup between the Irish and the Hurricanes. I went back and watched it because I know what those two teams are right now. I've seen them recently. I've seen them against common opponents. I've seen what Notre Dame has become. I've seen what Miami has become. And I went back and I had a few conclusions from that game. One, Notre Dame didn't even know who they were in that game. They had no idea. And I think that's a difficult thing to consider and a difficult thing to consume, because when you go back and you watch what Notre Dame is in week 12 versus what Notre Dame was in week 1, they were completely different from an offensive identity standpoint. They were no longer utilizing quarterback runs. In the first game against Miami, they were trying to run CJ Carr on some quarterback runs in short yardage situations like they had with Riley Leonard, and it was really unsuccessful. But they didn't even know what they had. Jeremiah Love had 10 carries for 33 yards. They didn't really feature some of their best playmakers throughout some of the evening. And now, of course, with hindsight being 2020, we now know that Notre Dame has turned into a juggernaut. I think they're a top 5 team in college football. And I really believe this. Had they gotten in the field, I honestly think they could have won the national championship. I genuinely believe that. But when I went back and I watched that game, Miami thoroughly beat them along both lines of scrimmage. And people will go back and look at the margins, but you can't always look at the margin. Yes, it was a 3-point game. Yes, it got tight there at the end of the game. But if you go back and watch how often Miami was setting the edge, how often Miami was penetrating, how often Miami was moving Notre Dame players off the ball, it was pretty obvious to me as someone that is just wants what's best for the sport. It was pretty obvious to me that Miami handled Notre Dame. And I think the coaches on the committee, I think the players on the committee probably went back and did the exact same thing I did. I don't know how you couldn't. You're determining these teams' postseason fate. You had to go back and watch that game. And while, yes, if they played tomorrow, I would pick Notre Dame. But they're not playing on December 8th. They played on the Sunday of Labor Day. And that result has to carry weight, because that's the other precedent that could get set in the event in which Notre Dame got in over Miami, is that you are essentially telling people, yep, that outcome, yeah, we're going to overlook that one because it just doesn't matter. It's not indicative of what this team is or what this team is and all these other things. You're essentially telling people that the game doesn't matter and that the eye test matters more. And if that's the case, then what was the point of Oklahoma playing against Boise State in the 2006 Fiesta Bowl? If that's the case, what was the point in Washington a couple years ago playing against Texas in the Sugar Bowl? And I know those are postseason games, but what was the point of Michigan playing against Appalachian State in the mid-2000s? And I can think of a million different examples in which an unexpected victory was secured, one that we didn't anticipate. And guess what? Those outcomes mattered. And none of us would have thought it, because if we're going off the eye test, Oklahoma would have rolled Boise. Michigan would have rolled Appalachian State. And any other significant dog probably wouldn't have pulled the outright upset. But the eye test should not be what determines who competes in the postseason. The games and the data points that we accumulate throughout the season should be the biggest differentiator. And once the metrics were all completely the same between Notre Dame and Miami, the strength of record being within one spot, the strength of schedule being within 2 spots, and then the game control being within 1 spot, once the metrics were identical, it became pretty obvious that you had to acknowledge the head-to-head result above all else, just like you did in every other possible toss-up ranking that you have in this game. Indiana beat Ohio State. They reside 1 spot in front of Ohio State. Georgia beat Ole Miss. They reside 3 spots in front of Ole Miss. Ole Miss beat Oklahoma. They reside 2 spots in front of Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat Alabama. They sit at 8. Bama sits at 9. Miami beat Notre Dame. They're at 10. Notre Dame's at 11. Texas beat Vanderbilt. Texas is 13. Vanderbilt is at 14. BYU beat Utah. BYU's 12. Utah is 15. Southern Cal beat Michigan. Southern Cal is 16. Michigan is 18. All throughout these rankings, the head-to-head is what won the day. And it had to be the case when it came to the evaluation of Notre Dame and Miami. Now, here's the biggest problem, is that the committee made their bed. I feel like this committee, if there's a flaw when evaluating this committee, is that they are way too reactionary and that they have overly penalized teams based on recency. That happened in the event in which Miami was 18th in the initial college football playoff ranking because they had lost 2 out of 3. That was way too aggressive to have them dropped that far. But frankly, over a 3-week span leading into the rankings, they didn't look very good. So the committee probably was overly penal with where Miami started the game. I think when you look at Ole Miss and Texas A&M, the conundrum that we talked about between 6 and 7, Texas A&M was a top 3 team, many making arguments on their behalf to be the number 1 team in college football before they lost to Texas. They drop from 3 to 7, even though the metrics supporting A&M are actually better than that of the team that sits right in front of them. I look at Alabama, who lost as the 4 seed to Oklahoma at home when they were -3 in the turnover margin and lost the game by 2. They also missed a field goal in that game. They dropped from 4 to 10, even though the metrics would support them being considerably higher. And frankly, they should have been higher than Notre Dame from start to finish based on strength of schedule and based on strength of record. So this committee has been overly penal, I think, based on recency. And that is something that they need to address moving forward. They need to see bigger picture. They need to make adjustments and they need to make changes. One other massive takeaway when it comes to evaluating where we're at right now in the college football playoff. I think we are going to get to a point, probably sooner than later, in which you are going to have to be above a certain threshold to qualify for the college football playoff. For example, James Madison, whom I have tremendous amount of respect for. I love this program. I love everything that Bob Chesney is about, but their strength of schedule is 123. And yet they deserve it. They're a college football playoff team because the current format, the current criteria has allowed them to become a college football playoff team. But if your strength of schedule is not in the top 80 or top 70 or top 90, wherever they decide to set it at, you shouldn't be eligible to qualify for the college football playoff. If your power rating isn't above a certain threshold, and in all likelihood, you will be uncompetitive in the first round of the playoff, then you probably shouldn't be in the situation where you automatically qualify. Like they're going to take, I think this offseason, they're going to take a really good, long, hard look at the automatic qualifiers. Because right now it goes to the top 5 conference champions, which, by the way, everyone that made the field deserves to be in the field. But they probably need to make some tweaks. Because right now, to reward a team for having a great win-loss record, when in reality they've played one Power 4 team and lost that game by 14 points, that's going to be a problem going forward. So I would expect that to get adjusted. The other thing that we really need to adjust very, very soon, I study the sport all the time. I host a college football podcast called Always College Football. I literally eat, sleep, and breathe the sport. You guys know that. I love it. Y'all love it. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. It's a labor of love. I'm just obsessed with college football. It's so much fun. But even someone that is as deep in the weeds as I am, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are every bit as deep in the weeds as I am as well, because I get emails from you guys telling me tweaks and adjustments and things we need to make and things we need to consider, and they're phenomenally well thought out. And we have a very cerebral listener base. It's amazing. But I don't think there's anybody that can accurately explain tiebreakers right now when it comes to these conference championship games. I don't understand it. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy. I feel like I try really hard to understand it. I just don't. I mean, the fact that Duke, and who I have a ton of respect for, they're deserving ACC champions based on the current criteria, but the fact that they essentially stole a bid is something that could be looked at in the future. And if I'm the ACC or the Big 12 or the SEC, the Big 10, any of these conferences, the American, the Sun Belt, the MAC, I mean, all of them, every Conference USA, every single league needs to adopt all right, here's our conference standings. Here's what your record is in conference. Okay. These three teams have the same record. Well, instead of going to the 8th tiebreaker that nobody understands, why don't you just take the top 2 teams from the league based on the ranking, or based on the Sagarin rating, or based on a BCS formula? I don't care what you use. Take the 2 best teams in your league, and you automatically play those 2 teams in the conference title game. Now, it worked out in the Big Ten this year. You had the top 2. They both qualified. They met in Indianapolis, and it was a remarkable game. Right now, is Alabama the first or second team in the SEC? Probably not. Should it have been Ole Miss? Should it have been A&M? Wherever the rankings, however they sort out, those should be the teams potentially that would go to the conference championship game to play in that scenario against Georgia. What about in the ACC, where you have a team that finished with a 6-2 record in the league, and there was a 5-way tie for second in the ACC? You had Virginia, who was 7-1. They were in a great spot. Virginia wins and they're in, but they're having to play against a team that's 7-5 and has no shot of making the college football playoff, even though their strength of schedule is significantly better than that of who they were being measured against in James Madison. But they could have just removed Miami and all of a sudden, or remove Duke, insert Miami, and now the ACC championship game just became a part of a further expanded playoff. Winners in, losers out in that scenario. So I think it's a way of expanding the playoff if you just take the top 2 teams in the league, play them on conference championships, and that, I think, will iron out some of the concerns and the issues that we've dealt with here up to this point. I want to start by looking at this college football playoff field and begin by telling you, I think this is the first time that we've done this in a while, and first time that I can recall a team being left out of the playoff that theoretically would be among the top 2 or 3 favorites to maybe win the whole thing. And with Notre Dame being left out, and I don't want to harp on this because I am frankly disappointed for their team. I love that program. I love everything they stand for. I love the progress they made this year. I love where they started and where they finished and just the improvements that they made from week to week. I think Marcus Freeman and his staff did an amazing job. I really believe that. But I think they will now join a very famous, or I guess infamous, list of teams that will always wonder what if, right? And some that kind of come to mind off the top of my head. 2023 Georgia. The amazing football team. They'd won 2 championships in a row. They lose in the SEC title. They're left out of the college football playoff. They, of course, go and destroy Florida State in the postseason. But had they made the 4-team field, would the outcome have been different? Would they have maybe made it and won the championship and avenged the loss to Bama like they did 2 years prior in 2021? I look back at 2015 Ohio State. Probably one of the most talented teams I've ever covered. Couldn't figure out quarterback, had issues, Cardale Jones, JT Barrett, back and forth, and then the team loses to a backup quarterback in Michigan State. Michigan State ends up winning the Big Ten, making the college football playoff, and then sure enough, that Ohio State team that was as talented as any is on the outside looking in. Another would be the 2011 Oklahoma State Cowboys. Remember, they lose the game to Iowa State. Them against Alabama there in 2011 to face off against undefeated LSU. Alabama had lost to LSU earlier in the season, and then they're both there sitting 11-1 with a chance to, or 12-1 if you're the Pokes. If they had just gotten in, would it have been different, right? The great what ifs of college football will always be a huge part of our storytelling, and it's agonizing. I don't even know how to wrap your head around it, because I really think they're one of the best teams. I really do. I think Miami's case to be in was stronger because they won the game. But if we were taking the top 12 teams, there is no question that Notre Dame is in the field. And because of the disappointment and trying to compartmentalize what just transpired, they've decided to opt out of a bowl game. And who can blame them? I mean, it's devastating to be on the outside looking in. But I think for Notre Dame, this can go one of two ways. It can galvanize their roster. It can create an edge. It can create a sense of urgency in the offseason. And they can be right back here next year competing for a championship with a second-year starting quarterback, with a ridiculously talented core, with a clear and established offensive identity that's built around the quarterback. I mean, they can come back stronger from this disappointment. Or you can allow this disappointment to fester, have it infiltrate your brain, and you become Florida State the following year. Now, am I envisioning Notre Dame going 2-10? Absolutely not. No. But failures are part of the story when you are an athlete. It is. It's part of the story. But the great ones respond, and the great programs respond. And I happen to think that Nick Saban always said this: you never waste a failure. You never waste a failure. And while in many ways, maybe Notre Dame doesn't feel like they failed, maybe they were just wronged, I think this can serve as an opportunity to learn and to be better in week 1 and week 2, and to start the season faster so they can avoid the result that they just experienced here in 2025. Because I'm sick to my stomach for them, but based on the information that the committee had sitting right in front of them, I think it was justifiable to make the decision the committee ultimately ended up making. All right, now that we've done all that and we've assessed where the committee made the right decision, the wrong decision, we've hopefully help it make sense, because I think there's a lot of people that are trying to understand how, what just happened, why did it happen. Hopefully that will allow you to kind of understand why the committee did what they did. But now it's time to turn our attention to the college football playoff. And what matchups do we have, man? I mean, goodness gracious, it's going to be awesome. We will get things kicked off in Norman, Oklahoma, where Alabama will travel to Oklahoma. Right now, about a 1.5-point favorite, thereabouts, are the Crimson Tide on the road against a team that beat them in the regular season at their place. The big questions here: both teams playing great defense. Oklahoma playing elite level defense. But what's going on with the offenses? Can either offense find something in this matchup? I mean, this could be a game that might be 10-7, and it might be determined by a big mistake by one side or the other. But can either offense either get healthy and kind of find themselves here in the next week and a half to put their best foot forward? Because that's a huge game, and one that I think can be won by either side, but it might be mistake avoidance in this game as much as it is flexing offensively, because these defenses are very opportunistic on both sides. After that game, it'll be Miami and Texas A&M. It'll be noon Eastern time on ABC on Saturday. Miami, I think, is going to go into this season, they go into this postseason guns a-blazing, man. They just got a new lease on life. They're back. They got a shot. I would imagine that's remarkably freeing to know, all right, guys, hey, we got nothing to lose. We're playing with house money. Didn't expect to be here. Let's go send it. And A&M, they're licking their wounds a little bit because the last time out, they played probably their worst game of the year. And if you look at how A&M has consistently attacked the opposing quarterback, their relentless pursuit on third down, their exotic pressures on third down, This will be a fascinating game decided along both lines of scrimmage. This is a line of scrimmage game all day long, with A&M and their veteran offensive line working against Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, and many others along Miami's defensive line. And then on the other side, Miami's offensive line, featuring a bunch of future pros as well, working against one of the most aggressive defensive lines in the country. I mean, this is a line of scrimmage game in the biggest possible way, with some electric playmakers on the outside too, with Malachi Toney from Miami, Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver on the outside for Texas A&M, and a good quarterback matchup where both guys maybe a little too high for the high sometimes, too low for the low sometimes. Just need steady performance from their quarterbacks in this matchup, but that's going to be off the charts good. The Pete Golding area will get underway in Oxford, Mississippi following that game. Tulane with John Sumrall will head to town. They beat Tulane 45-10. The last time these two teams played, they played in, week 3 or week 2 earlier in the season. It was a lot to a little. Tulane made a lot of mistakes in that game, but Ole Miss continues to be excellent on the offensive side. And with the improvements that we've now seen from Ole Miss defensively, that should be one that Ole Miss, I would expect them to handle business in that game. And then James Madison will take on Oregon in the Saturday night edition there from Autzen Stadium. Should be 7:30 Eastern time or 8 o'clock Eastern time. So that means 5 o'clock Pacific time. Yeah, they'll be rocking and rolling out there in Autzen. It'll be a great scene. JMU is going to have their hands full. I can assure you that. Oregon is a legit outfit. And then how about these matchups potentially in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic? That game will be played on New Year's Eve. Miami A&M winner taking on the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, what a way to send off 2025 with that matchup going deep into the night. That game will be followed by the Orange Bowl. That'll be January 1st, noon Eastern time. Texas Tech awaits the winner of Oregon and James Madison. Then you'll be following that with the Rose Bowl game presented by Prudential. That's when Indiana will host the winner of Alabama and Oklahoma. And whoever wins that Alabama-Oklahoma game, they better be ready to roll, because Indiana can flat out beat you in a million different ways. And then finally, on January 1st at 8 o'clock Eastern time, the Georgia Bulldogs will host in the All-State Sugar Bowl the Ole Miss Rebels and or the Tulane Green Wave. So that'll be an interesting matchup, potentially a rematch of a game that was outstanding earlier in the year between Ole Miss and Georgia, one which Ole Miss had the lead there in the first 3 quarters before Georgia stormed back and completely took the game over. The winner of the Cotton Bowl and the Sugar Bowl will meet in the Fiesta Bowl on January 8th. The winner of the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl will meet in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl on January 9th. And then, of course, the winner, those 2 games, will meet in South Florida at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, Florida on January 19th. So a lot to look forward to. We hope you guys are as excited as we are. We will do a full and comprehensive breakdown of all these playoff games. Don't worry. We'll dive in, we'll get in the weeds, and we'll have you as prepared as anybody to set the table for what should be some incredible postseason action. So for all of us here at Always College Football, continue to encourage you to like, to rate, to subscribe to the show. Wherever you get the podcast, subscribe on the podcast platform of your choosing. And then you can also check us out on the ESPN College Football YouTube page. So for all of us here at ACF, I've done the math. In the last 16 hours or so, thereabouts, it's about almost 20 hours. I've done about 9 hours of television / content and had about 3 hours of sleep. So I'm going to rest up. I'm going to rest the voice a little bit. We'll be back a little later this week. We're going to have some coaches on the air. We're going to have some great conversation, and then we will set the table with some previews as we lead you into that first round matchups involving all these incredible teams. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.